Welcome, everybody. We're talking today to Ted Sevransky, professional sports bettor out in Las Vegas, and we're going to talk about the divisional matchups and what we learned from these games. First and foremost, Ted, great to have you back with us, and I hope that you beat the book and beat them hard this weekend. First game, we'll just go in order. Patriots and Chiefs, what do you think were some facts that came to life or some things that we maybe didn't know, but what did we learn from this game, and what's your input on possibly, you know, it was something unsuspecting, or did anything catch you by surprise?
Well, the number one takeaway from Pats Chiefs has to be the return to normalcy for New England's offense. You know, this was an offense that was banged up beyond belief over the final 2 weeks of this season, where, you know, the offensive line couldn't protect Tom Brady, and Brady didn't have anyone to throw to, and there were no healthy running backs, and on down the line. You know, the two late season losses to the Jets and the Dolphins were both in large part due to the fact that offense just didn't work. And with Edelman and Amendola and Gronkowski all on the field together, with the offensive line in decent shape, all of a sudden Tom Brady looked like the quarterback that he is, the surefire Hall of Famer, and you know, New England's offense was able to move the ball very well against a top-notch Kansas City defense. However, at the end of the game, you go back and look at the you know, some of the concerns for New England. I mean, this is a team that continues to be particularly banged up. Of the four teams still standing, the Patriots have more injury concerns than any of the other three. We'll talk about that specifically in another video later today. We break down all the injuries in the NFL this past weekend.
Yeah, also, Ted, I thought with the Patriots, and you hit it, Edelman just made such a difference. And I know he had a few drops there in the beginning, finding his way, but just his speed and his cutting across the middle, you know, it just made such a difference. It opens up everything else. My only concern is the lack of running game, but the way they were going down the field and their game plan obviously was just to, you know, shoot and attack, and that's what they seem to do very effectively. I'm also, you know, just this Gronkowski is such a beast. I heard a report that he's not even 75%, and he's still playing, just, you know, absolutely like a team leader. And what he brings to that team, and then, of course, Amendola getting back in action, it's amazing. So there's not a lot of surprises for me. Again, you give, and you touched on this last week, you give Bill Belichick 2 weeks to prepare for anybody, he's going to figure something out one way or the other, and obviously they did. Now, Arizona at the Packers, I saw some interesting, you know, dynamics to this game, and again, Packers on this Hail Mary situation working out again for them, and almost on that 4th and 20, you could consider that almost a Hail Mary. What was brought to the light in that game, Ted, and what did we learn from Arizona against the Packers?
Well, there were two games this weekend in which, and this is one of the two, even though the game ended up being decided by 6 points, not 7. But there were two games this weekend in which betting skills trumped any handicapping skills. And this is one of those games. And, of course, at this time of the year, on an NFL weekend where of the 8 sides in play, if you teased all 8, didn't matter which ones you teased, you won them all. That tells us that the betting markets are tight at this time of year, which we expect. You have a full season's worth of stats on all of these teams. But when the lines are as tight as they are and teasers are cashing whichever way you bet them, boy, you have to be shopping for the best of the number. And, of course, if you laid 7.5 with Arizona, you weren't liking anything about that fourth quarter. If you laid 7 with Arizona, you're live until the final, at least for the push, until the final play of the game. If you took 7.5, or regulation, I should say. If you took 7.5 with Green Bay, you're feeling real comfortable. You got the best of the number. At no point are you sweating. If you took 7, you're like, oh, my God, I'm going to push this stupid game that I should have won. So the betting skills oftentimes trump the handicapping skills. We spend a lot of time trying to break down games. We don't necessarily spend enough time trying to talk about the importance of every half point. But at this time of the year, I mean, that's my number one takeaway from Arizona, Green Bay, and from Denver, Pittsburgh. Wow. Those half points matter. They really do. When it came down to the game itself, I mean, look, Carson Palmer stunk. You know, Palmer was he played very poorly in Week 17 against Seattle. He played very poorly in the win over the Packers. Luckily, in this game, A, Arizona's defense really came to play, and B, he was, you know, he got a tip throw in the end zone that turned into a touchdown. He was able to get Larry Fitzgerald to, catch and run for 75 yards in overtime. Palmer comes away with the win, but the questions about his poise in pressure situations Those really weren't answered. It was not a good game for Carson Palmer. Arizona won despite of him, not because of him.
And that was my next question, so you already answered that, because that's what I took away from this. Not a lot of people know that was a big thing. Carson Palmer got his first playoff win, but if I'm correct, that's only his third playoff game. So he is not seasoned at this level. And yeah, had it not been for Fitzgerald, doing what he was, looking like he was just young again, because that guy he put the team on his back in that fourth quarter. But had it not been for that, I don't know if the outcome might have been different. But you nailed one thing specifically, Ted. That defense came to play. They they showed up, and they're very, very well coached. I think that's going to be, their positive in the next round. I think they're going to have to lean on that, because offensively, I just wasn't, overly impressed. I'll just leave it at that. Panthers versus Seattle. This is one that had a lot of people thinking at halftime, okay, we know where this is going. And then also in the second half, people going, oh my God, if there was a couple more minutes left, what would be the outcome? What did you pull away from this game, Panthers and Seattle, Ted? And was there anything that really kind of caught you by surprise?
And this is a really hard game to get takeaways from, because you had absolutely a tale of two very, very different halves. The first half, Carolina did everything right. Seattle did everything wrong. It's 31-0 at the break. You expect teams to let down. If you watch the betting markets at halftime of that game, man, they were betting the shit out of Seattle at halftime. Mm-hmm. Pardon my language, but I'm sure you guys have heard the word before. That's one advantage of not doing terrestrial radio, where you can't say that word.
No,
on videos, I can, and I'm happy to do it. But the bottom line for Carolina is, that's the good Panthers, that's the bad Panthers. What we saw over the entirety of the campaign, where Carolina won a whole lot of games but didn't earn a whole lot of respect in the betting markets. The reason why, in part, came with what we saw in that contest. Now, you can't rip a team too bad for being up 31-0 at halftime and then letting down a little bit. It's a natural human reaction, and especially when it's a team like the Seahawks, a team that has given Carolina fits in recent years, and the two-time defending NFC champs. You go up 31-0 at the break, of course you're coming out flat. But the fact that they couldn't score a point after halftime, they were lucky the defense got the one stop. Seattle went touchdown their first two drives. They go touchdown on the third drive. I think they win the game. But Carolina was able to get one big sack and force one punt, and they ran off 5 minutes of clock on their next drive before punting away, and that shortened the game enough to allow them to escape with the victory. But, we saw the Carolina good, how dominant this team can be, how strong that offense was, and we saw the Carolina bad, how this team does sometimes lose focus with the lead. We saw it against the Giants. We saw it against the Saints. And these are late season games. And we certainly saw it again against the Seahawks team that still has not lost a game by more than 10 points in the Russell Wilson era. The last time Seattle lost a game by more than 10, the starting quarterback was Tavares Jackson.
That's a great point, Ted. I had no idea about that. That's a hell of a stat right there. I see a lot of similarities with Panthers and Arizona as far as lack of playoff experience. And that does concern me, because that second half, whether they laid down, and of course, like you said, it's a natural reaction. It is. You're up 31-0. The tank's going to be almost empty. But the fact that they just didn't try to piece anything solid together, and I don't think they pressed on that as well, that concerns me for their next round, because I think Arizona's defense will be ready for this game. But I wonder, is it Cam Newton not having that experience, or is it Ron Rivera not having that coaching experience at this level, plunging into the playoffs to push his team in the second half? I guess, again,
I don't agree with that. Cam Newton's had three playoff starts the previous 2 years. Carolina's been in the playoffs. It's the third straight year Carolina's been in the playoffs. They won a playoff game last year. Arizona doesn't have a ton of playoff experience, not with this squad. But Carolina's, this is their third straight year in the postseason.
And one thing I think is different too, Ted, is the Panthers this year going to the playoffs. There was so much more pressure because of their record, 15-1 going into the playoffs. That's different from what's happened years past. And yeah, you're right, they've been to the playoffs. But I just think the level of where you're really thinking championship in their head, I don't think they've been to where they are now. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out next week. Now the Broncos and Steelers, the last game, besides Big Ben, and you called it too, he might just just show up and start, throwing 50, 60-yard bombs. He opened up first play of the game throwing downfield pretty deep. What came out of that game, expected and unexpected? And, what are your thoughts on what the Steelers maybe could have done a little differently?
Yeah, I mean, the reports in the pregame warm-ups were talking about how, and boy, Twitter's such a good tool when it comes to, right before the game making bets and that sort of thing. You really can find good on-field information from beat reporters if you follow the right people. And the reports coming out of Denver prior to the game was that in warm-ups, Manning didn't throw anything longer than 15 yards. He didn't want to show Big Ben didn't throw anything longer than 15 yards. He didn't want to show the Broncos if he could open up or not, which, in fact, he was able to. But, look, Denver is here now, and they earned the number 1 seed in the AFC, and they've been I'll call them an elite contender all year, not because of their offense, only because of their defense. And it showed up again against Pittsburgh. I mean, the fourth quarter fumble after a long drive with the Steelers already with the lead and in scoring range. You punch out that fumble, and then Manning has one good drive to win the game in the fourth quarter, although a lot of that came with C.J. Anderson on the ground as opposed to Manning through the air. But the Broncos defense, we've seen it all year. They're good enough to win games even when the offense does nothing or next to nothing, even when the passing game isn't working, even when the running game isn't working. It has been the league's best defense from day one this year. That hasn't changed here in January. And, the old adage, defense wins championships. Denver's got the best defense still standing.
Yeah, that speaks volumes, too. And, I was surprised the Broncos didn't lean more on C.J. Anderson. They spread that ball out quite a bit. I think next week we're going to see more of Anderson. I just think he's more of a horse. One encouraging thing, and again, I separate the heart from the betting, but, I'm a Manning fan, but I was glad to see, in the fourth quarter, he had some zip on his balls again. They weren't downfield too far, but, he was still threading the needle on a couple occasions that were huge. One thing I thought of, Ted, how much they really would miss a healthy Wes Welker if he was still playing, if he didn't have those concussions, because I think he would have the same effect on Broncos as Edelman did with the Patriots. But I was, very, very impressed, though, with the Steelers' effort, because they've been banged up all year. That team has been banged up all year, and they still showed up. And, my hat's off to the coaching staff there and to Big Ben being the leader that he is. So, all right, Ted, well, listen, we appreciate it. Viewers out there, there's a breakdown of what we learned from divisional playoff round, and we're going to break down another video later on with some injury updates. Tune in for that. And then as the week goes on, we'll get closer to getting some picks for next week. Ted, thanks so much for being with us, and we look forward to talking to you again real soon.